Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Elliot Berlin, and I'm joined by today's co-host, Kristen Palacey. Welcome, Kristen. You became a mother this year.
Yes.
And you're just about finished with your chiropractic training at the University of Southern California Health Sciences. And you've taken a strong interest in pre- and postnatal care.
I have.
And it's now you've been on the podcast before.
Yes.
And you're a phenomenal host. And
thank you.
You're a great book reviewer. So
Thanks.
That brings me to the next thing. Our guest in the studio today has taken a long and interesting journey to becoming a published author. She recently completed a memoir titled Second Chance, A Mother's Quest for a Natural Birth After a Cesarean. She flew in today from Northern California, where she lives with her husband and 2 children. Thais Nye Derich, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Really nice to meet you. Writing a book's not simple.
Agreed.
It's people say it's sort of like having a baby. And I'm, we made documentaries, which I also sort of felt was like having a baby, or as close as I can come to that. So already with nothing else, knowing nothing else about you, but knowing that you wrote a book, and then also that it's popular and a great book, means you've accomplished a lot. But this is not where you started.
That's right. Yeah.
You did not start thinking, I want to become a book writer. Right? What did you study originally?
So I studied recreation administration, which is basically going in to run a hotel or be in the park service or...
Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, exactly.
With a minor in French.
With a minor in French.
Which is I'm fluent in French.
Oh, bonjour.
Oh, no, just breakfast foods.
Oh.
Yeah. Croissant. Brioche. Yeah.
I was trying to tell my son the other day that it's not le croix, it's la croix for the sparkling water.
Oh, really? It's not the Croix?
Yeah.
Cute.
How is it really?
La croix.
Oh, it sounds better that way.
Oh.
It sounds almost like refreshing when you say it that way.
Yeah. Probably like it's
better.
supposed to sound.
That's what I think so you studied Parks and Rec and some French with the mission of going into the hotel industry? Or?
Yeah, so I had kind of a childhood dream of owning a bed and breakfast on the coast, and that never happened.
Sounds nice, though. I could go there if you're in that.
I know, I still dream about it. What ended up happening was I spent a lot of time abroad learning French, and I ended up in my last year of college being like, what am I going to do? And spending a lot of time in Paris, I was like, okay, I think I want to work in museums, and that kind of fits what I studied. So nonprofit industry. And then I also, that's when the tech boom was happening, so I got a technical writing certification. And so that's sort of like a minor. So I left, worked at the Exploratorium, and then quit and started doing my technical writing at Cisco, and then Adobe, or Macromedia, and then Adobe bought Macromedia, and so on and so forth.
It sounds way different than a bed and breakfast on the coast, I'm just saying.
A little more stressful.
Yeah, I think that's what happens. You live in San Francisco, and everybody's at the bars talking about how much money they're making, and you're just like, okay, I guess I should probably get in this industry. And luckily I was smart enough to have, a technical writing certification to get myself in there. But now I'm not even doing that. So life always changes. I think about life as decade by decade. You can always change and do something different.
Oh, that seems interesting. I want to make my decade chart.
Yes, that'd be interesting.
When did you move out of that industry?
So that was the first child. So I was working at Adobe, great job. I biked to work. My husband also was biking to work. We had a beautiful flat in San Francisco. And I'll tell you about my birth later, but in terms of the job, after the birth, I was so traumatized, I couldn't hold down a job. So PTSD style. And I had some bad luck with childcare, and that just did me in. And so we said, oh, let's try, like, see if we can afford you not working. And I've been basically now contracting in different ways for 10 years, you know?
I mean, just the small time I've gotten to know you, you don't sound like a not working type.
No, I'm not. I'm
just-
always working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're always working. You just like always, you look like you're always looking for you have your finger on the pulse and what you want to do next.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, I don't know. I'm always wanting to do something, keep busy. And right now it's the book, and I'm going to learn to be like a keynote speaker so I can get this message across to more people. And so I'm training to do that. And so hopefully I'll be more on the road and just speaking about this issue because it's so important to me, and I think to
This is the
our
keynote speaker
society.
decade.
Yeah.
It is the keynote.
It's like she's making a
speaker.
constellation and like
Yes.
following her.
Yeah.
I want to learn this. Or go
Orion's
this way.
belt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had
Her
like
Orion's
a
belt.
little less than a decade writing the book, and now it's kind of the book promotion. But for me, it's less about being I'm on an author tour where you go to bookstores and you do a reading, and my favorite part is talking about the issues, you know, and what's going on in the birth world. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, I thought this was a book reading."
Well, let's go back to the beginning. You when you had your first baby,
Yeah.
you know, you were not involved in the birth community at all.
Not at all. I was your typical mainstream mama.
Were you planning to have a kid, or it just kind of fell on
Yeah,
you?
no, I
You
definitely.
were ready.
I had a huge drive to have children, and I know it was a huge drive because I do not want any more kids right now at all. So
You have a
whenever
huge break.
people say I want to have a kid, I'm like, you should have a kid then, because when you don't want to have a kid, you don't want to have a kid.
You really don't. Yeah.
Yeah. Then it's like past. You're
Yeah,
like,
So I mean, it started because you were ready to have kids.
I was ready to have kids. Yeah.
And so you got pregnant.
Yep.
And how was your pregnancy?
Pregnancy was great. I was super happy, healthy, no issues at all.
Eat well, exercise.
Eat well,
You
exercise.
drink the green stuff?
Like green juice.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was green juicing during pregnancy.
You don't know? Yoga? I'm trying to get a sense. Are you
Of
sort
like
of
what
like
me back then, what I was doing? Huh. I think I did do yoga at the time. You know, I was a big tennis player, but I probably wasn't playing tennis
Ew.
while I was pregnant.
I played tennis twice and both times.
it's so hard.
Well, one time the first time I ever played tennis, I got whacked in the face with a tennis racket and broke a tooth
Oh.
in camp. It was
That'll
in
do
summer
it.
camp, and I remember because you only had pizza day once a week, and it was pizza day, but I couldn't eat it because I had a nerve dangling out of my face. So I thought I'd never go again. And then the second time, I was in chiropractic school, actually, and one of my chiro buddies was like, hey, we should go play tennis, because I was looking for interesting ways to work out. And he's like, tennis is fun. You don't even realize you're exercising, which is a load of... Anyway, so I'd never really hit a tennis ball before. I'd only been hit by a tennis racket, so I know how the ball feels. And he's like, let me serve you some, and you'll hit him back to me. So I played baseball. So he lobbed over a serve, and I hit it like a baseball. It went over the giant fence, and then went down on the road where it hit a car in the windshield, and
Oh
he
my
slammed on his
God.
brakes and came this close to getting rear-ended. So I ran away and took the message from the universe: tennis is not my thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's
That's
But
a
you were
big
playing
sign.
tennis, which is good, because
those
somebody
are really
has to.
unfortunate events.
Yeah. Were you a tennis player before you got pregnant?
Yeah, I played competitively girls 18 and under.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, no
Northern
kidding.
California. Yeah, top 10.
Did it feel different pregnant?
Playing tennis?
Yeah.
Yeah, it hurt. Just the twisting and stuff was not.
What about the baby running around with you? Is that? Did you feel like the baby was playing too? Doubles? No.
No, I wasn't getting any extra.
Extra boom.
No.
Yeah.
If you play with one other pregnant woman, you're playing doubles.
Yeah,
That's
that's
so
right.
true.
See.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. I just got hooked on tennis.
Tennis is addicting.
You
Were
caught
you
me.
working at the time when
Yeah,
you for your
I was
first
working.
pregnancy?
Tech writing?
Tech writing, yep.
And so during your pregnancy, you feel good. You're active. You're healthy. You
Yeah.
feel good. What are you doing to get ready for birth?
And not much. I'm just doing the OB visits. So pee in the cup, 5 minutes.
Measure your belly. They must
Maybe.
measure your belly. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to.
Yeah,
Have
I
to.
can't
That's
remember.
the one thing they do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You pee
So
in the
like,
cup. They measure your belly.
right.
But then you hold on a second. But so you were planning to have an obstetrician birth at a hospital.
Yes, and I chose my obstetrician she was on the cover of 7x7 magazine, which is kind of the San Francisco hip magazine.
Oh.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, she must be great.
Yeah, she must be great.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What's the equivalent of that here? Do we have one of those?
I don't think
Los
so.
Angeles?
Like
Hmm.
I don't think we do.
I think my wife chose hers from Cosmo.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. That's not true at all.
I think you just have to kind of look it up and hope for the best.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I
just
mean-
figured everybody was the same. I didn't realize that there was going to be a difference. I thought that everybody would just practice evidence-based birth and I would get the best birth out there because I lived in San Francisco and I was an educated woman. I was going to, state-of-the-art hospital, and why shouldn't everything be how it should be?
Well,
So,
I mean, a lot of women are afraid of childbirth during pregnancy. Did you have fears about it? Were you talking to other women about it, or?
no, I mean, I was actually really wanting a natural birth. I knew I could
What is
do it.
natural? Because it's such a
Yeah, so
hot
for
term.
me at the time, it was a vaginal birth with no drugs.
natural,
Yeah, natural, like really natural.
or the natural. Is that French?
Yes.
No,
I don't think so.
this is Target. It's not really French.
We made it up.
Yeah, so
Why did you want that?
I have no idea. I think I just knew I could do it. I was an athlete and felt healthy and wanted to just experience it without really knowing. I didn't really overthink it.
But, I mean, haven't you
just-
ever seen movies of women or TV like where they're screaming their heads off, biting their husbands?
Yeah, I didn't buy into
Well, it
that.
doesn't have an impact on you. You
too
just
much.
thought you wrote it off
Yeah.
as just TV drama.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I did.
Did you have friends who had kids? Or are you the first in your pack?
Yeah, I was one of the first. I had a friend who had her kids. She had them naturally. My sister had 2 C-sections.
Okay, so when you got closer, were you doing any classes or reading any books?
Oh yeah, I did take a birth class. And the one thing I remember about this birth class was, whatever happens, do what the doctor says. Don't be a hero.
Oh.
She just
Was it a hospital birth class by
Yes.
chance? Okay. So basically how to be a good patient.
Yes, she drilled it in us to just be quiet.
I have to say I think around here there are some really interestingly good hospital birth classes now. They're evolving over time.
Yeah.
But they still come with a point of view, and the point of view is kind of like, we'd like you to do us what we want you to do. But I think they're a lot better than they used to be, and there's some really good ones around here. So, but yours sounds like the classic hospital birth, which is, if I could subtitle it, it's How to Be a Great Patient.
Yeah, it was not good for me. I think that birth class. If I had just had a different birth class, I think it could have helped, because I think I knew what I wanted. I didn't realize I had to fight for it.
So did you not want to look at any other types of classes, or you just after that one you
I just
felt
had no
like that was
idea. I
ready?
mean,
Yes, okay,
that's just what
Class, check.
exactly. Yeah.
Checklist, pack bag, check.
Yep.
Did your OB recommend taking childbirth classes or anything like that, or?
I think it was one of the ones they
recommended.
recommended. Yeah.
7x7.
7x7. Yeah.
So, how does your labor start?
So my water breaks, and
We're in relation to your due date.
I was 40 weeks. So
You're like on your due date? You're the one?
pretty much. I
That
think I
doesn't
was-
surprise me already about you.
Why is that?
I don't know. You just seem like the technical writer. Oh, 40 weeks.
Yeah, I remember that day. I walked and walked. It must have been my due date, because I walked and walked and walked and walked and walked, and I got my hair done and I got my nails done, and I just kept walking. And then I got home and I was like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. And I laid down and just,
Gush of water.
Yeah.
No mistake.
so.
That's my water.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Were you excited?
I was actually, when my water broke, I was a little nervous because I knew it fit into a smaller percentage of.
Oh, because you weren't having contractions yet?
Yeah.
Oh, so cerebrally you knew this.
I knew
is
it
not...
might not be a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it could be fine, but
Yeah.
if you're already having contractions and your water breaks, we don't have to worry about what happens if your water breaks and you're not having, and your contractions don't come.
Right. Yeah.
So just a little more comforting the other way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Did your contractions not start?
They ended up starting naturally when we got to the hospital the next day.
24 hours later?
It was less because I think we called the doctor to ask her what that meant. And she said, oh, don't worry, you know. And we said, well, is there any risk? And she said, well, there's always risk, you know, of infection. And she wasn't really giving us a straight answer of what we should do because I wasn't in labor yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we were wondering if we should go to the hospital or not go to the hospital. And she didn't want to say either way.
Well, that's interesting. So you kind of left it up to you.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. But at the time, we were frustrated because we just wanted her to
Input.
be straight with
Yeah,
us, you know?
because you don't do this for a living,
Exactly.
as it turns out.
So-
Although now you might.
She just said, come at 6 a.m. So we set the alarm, which, we shouldn't have done. We should have just slept until we woke up. And I didn't eat breakfast because I was so excited, which I should have done.
I eat
Because
double breakfast when I'm so excited. I envy people like you.
I'm also an eater. I'm like, oh, this looks great.
Happy,
So excited.
or if I'm sad,
Me too.
or
Chocolate
just
chip cookies.
or just because I woke up.
Yeah.
So you skip breakfast because you're
Yes,
excited.
which
and
I
you-
didn't realize, you can't eat during labor. So we had packed stuff.
I'm sorry. Is that a hospital policy?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
At your hospital. Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
don't know
we
if
had
it's that way
packed.
at every
Most.
hospital. Most.
Yeah. Depends on where.
And also,
you are.
it's changing. Like now, sometimes you get ice chips or Jello,
Yes.
or
God, when
or
I
that
found out
icy
I
thing.
couldn't have a drink of water, that I could only
You couldn't have
ice.
water.
No, I could only. They said, "Well, you can have some ice chips." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Wow. That's not supported anymore by ACOG, is it?
I have no idea.
I think
not
they're
sure.
like clear fluids.
But I know Whittier is actually like that also. Whittier
No
Hospital.
drinking.
Yeah. When I was there, I could only have ice chips.
My hospital
Also-
said no booze. I thought, is that ACOG? So, so you get there and you haven't eaten, and now you can't,
Yeah.
and your water's broken almost a day.
Yeah.
So do they want to? What do you want to do, and what do they want you to do?
So at that time, they were letting me see what happened. So I checked into a room. They brought me up in a wheelchair, which I thought was funny because.
Because you weren't sick? Because you play tennis? Because you're
Well,
strong,
I wasn't
healthy
even in
athlete?
labor, so it was like taking a normal person.
Just a policy again,
Yeah.
right?
I was like, okay, sure, I'll take a ride.
Yeah.
And I remember watching the sunrise. It was really pretty, nice, and I think we had a birth ball. We brought our birth ball, and I just was hanging out, and my contractions started.
On their own?
On their own, just like that, just when they needed to start. And so everything was looking good.
How'd they feel?
Painful, super bad.
Tolerable?
Yeah, I mean, we videotaped the labor, and that's one of the reasons why I'm able to write so clearly about what happened. And one of the things when I watched it, I remember thinking, wow, I look so calm. But kind of like what you said before the recording, this recording was in my head, I was miserable. But when you look at me visually through the video, I'm just laying there,
Interesting.
doing normal breathing, but I was just tormented in my head.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long did that go on for?
Oh, I mean, that was the whole time. It was hard for me.
But-
Yeah.
But you made up your mind you wanted no drugs.
Right.
Did you start second guessing that at some point?
Yeah, so what happened was I think the major thing that was difficult. Well, there was a lot of things that I remember feeling was annoying. One, just the nurses, different nurses, and a lot of vaginal exams. The vaginal exams were so painful, and they had you roll on your back, and it was, even now I just can't. It's just so painful, and it was like, for, a new nurse would come in and then one would leave and they'd chart. So if they came in, they'd vaginal exam, chart it. They left. Before they left, they'd chart. The new person would come in, check, like maybe even 5 minutes later, right? Because they're on duty. Check, note it, and then they would leave their shift. And
Or two things. First of all, are you at any point asking for them not to do that?
No. I didn't, I just didn't know.
Policy, so you're just going with it.
I just thought that, that
was normal.
That's just normal.
Also, are you progressing?
Yeah, I'm progressing enough. And then one of the nurses says, "Oh, I started to push." And one of the nurses says to another nurse, and this was another thing that psychologically it's interesting about birth, at least for mine, was when people are talking about you when you're sitting right there, you're kind of in your own world, of course, but you can hear what's going on. So a lot of times in this birth, people were talking about me, but not to me. So they're talking to each other like, "Oh my God, she's pushing." Mm-hmm. And, "Oh my God, she's pushing." And they check me and they, claim I'm complete, call in someone else, and someone else says, "Oh God, did you," and then they start bickering like she's not complete, she's 7, and they're talking to themselves, and one is like training, so she's like talking to her about the training, and and I'm like sitting there listening thinking, "Oh my God, I thought I was done, and now I'm at 7."
And you're wanting to push.
And I'm wanting to push, and I am totally confused, and they are confused. And I kind of give up at that point. I think it went on for a little while. I was like, I want the epidural, because I was so mad that they were not.
Like you didn't have any.
They didn't
support
know.
Or
yeah,
direction.
They didn't know what they were doing. It sounded like. So I'm like, I can't deal with this. Like, if you guys don't know what's going on, I need an epidural. And I remember when I got the epidural, I said, "Oh my God, that was the best decision I ever made." And I do still believe that was, even though it could have, ultimately, continued to lead to this cesarean in the end, at the time, it was so amazing to just have your pain taken away like that. Mm-hmm. Instantly. It was a miracle.
I have to imagine that, especially when you're done with it in your mind. You just, I see some women who just, it's like Tough Mudder. They just love it, It's intense. I'm not saying it's easy. It seems like the most intense thing, but they thrive on that intensity, the challenge and the adrenaline that comes with it. But then you sometimes see somebody who's totally done. And when you're done, turn off that pain, it looks like heaven. Like,
oh my God,
this is a gift from God. So how did that, because you said it turned into a cesarean, how did that turn into a cesarean, and over what period of time?
Yeah, so the one interesting thing that I always think back to about the epidural was when I got on the epidural, everybody calmed down. They dimmed the lights. I got a warm blanket. They turned the fetal monitor around, and my family came in and visited, and it was like the most peaceful experience. And I kept thinking, why
didn't we do this before?
Why didn't we do this before?
Yeah.
And the nurses left. Like, it was just lovely. And then they checked me periodically, let me sleep for a while, and then I was 10, I guess, for real. And then I had to push, and I couldn't feel. So before, I could feel the urge to push, so I knew what I was doing. And now they're like, push, and I was like, I don't feel like I need to push. But I was 10, and so you're being coached on how to push, like, I can't remember how they were coaching me, but it was just impossible. I didn't feel like I was doing anything. And
were they able to shut it down, the epidural, or turn it down so you can feel more?
That wasn't
Not presented
proposed.
to you.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So,
Did they give you anything else other than an epidural? Like,
oh yeah, before the epidural, actually, they said, they were trying to actually not give me the epidural straight away because I was
You
so
were so
close.
close. You were 10 or
Yeah.
7 or 10 or whatever.
I was so close, but I was so upset at that point too. So they gave me fentanyl,
Oh,
and that was
in your
horrible.
IV.
It was horrible because it made the pain worse.
Why?
I just don't think I reacted well to the morphine. I started seeing, like, hallucinating and seeing rabbits and stuff in the lights.
Had a weird effect on you. No, because for most people, when I see them get it, it has a very
good
calming and pain relieving effect.
Yeah.
They usually fall asleep.
Yeah, no, it just heightened everything for me. So actually, I even was demanding more when the fentanyl started kicking in. I'm like, oh my God, you have to give me the epidural. And they're like, but you just took this. I'm like, I don't care. They're like, give it 20 minutes. I'm like, no.
No, it had the
I
opposite
need-
effect on you.
Yeah, I'm seeing rabbits. It's really painful. So,
So is it because you couldn't feel and mechanically push that you ended up?
yeah, I mean, I pushed for 3 hours.
Oh wow!
So that was the limit. I know ACOG now recommends 4, which I could probably.
Oh, was that a hospital policy limit?
Yeah, 3 hours.
Oh, and then we call it period.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it sounded like.
Did you know that, like,
No.
as the hours were going by?
No, I didn't know that at all.
So just at 3, they're like, "Sorry, we have to go now."
Well, what happened was the nurse said, it's 11:30. I think we're kind of getting, we should probably call the doctor in from, her house. And is that okay with you? Can I call the doctor in? And right now, looking back, I'm like, basically that's when I decided to have the cesarean. I didn't know
At the time.
that meant basically I was having a cesarean. So the doctor was called in, and she had me push one time, and then just brought the paperwork and said, she rolled her stool up next to me, and she said, it's time to get this baby out. You're fine, your baby's fine, it's just time. And I just started crying. And I didn't know I could ask for more time. I didn't know that I could ask for a second opinion. I didn't know I could say no.
I'm guessing no doula.
No doula. Nobody, I started to cry because I didn't want one.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I didn't know how.
Why didn't you want one? I mean, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have not wanted one. I'm just saying, what about it was?
I don't know. Looking back, I just knew I didn't want one. And so I was sad to give that hope up of having the vaginal birth. I had my mind set on having one of those. So
you strike me, I don't know, I'm just wondering, you strike me as competitive and athletic.
yeah.
And this is sort of an athletic event.
Yeah.
and like a goal, right? She's goal oriented, like
Yeah.
not making your goal.
Yeah, I felt like I failed. I
Yeah,
felt like
that's
a
what I
failure, and
wondered.
I've even asked Zach, which my husband. I was just like, oh no, what did I say? I said I failed you, and I think what I was really saying is I failed myself. I asked him. I said, did I fail you? And he started crying at that point. He's like, no, no, of course not. But in my mind, I hadn't even had this cesarean yet. I was getting prepped for it. Pubic hairs are being shaved. 7 people are in there doing stuff to you. You sign the paper, and now really no one's asking you, for anything. They're just doing stuff. It was scary.
Thank you for sharing that so openly. I mean, It's we made a movie. I don't know if you've seen it, Trial of Labor,
Yeah.
and it's several women who had cesareans they didn't want, and many of them feel like they didn't need, and we follow them through their pregnancies, their second or sometimes third pregnancies, hoping for their first vaginal birth. It's hard to share it. And the reason they share their stories, and I'm sure the reason you're sharing yours, is to help other women. In their case, they want to help people not fall into the pitfalls that they fell into. And it sounds the same for you. And sort of like how to have your second birth experience the first time around might be a little subtitle.
Yeah.
For your book. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, I would like to hear more about how that cesarean experience was for you, because it obviously prompted a giant shift in your life, and to talk a little bit about your memoir, Second Chance. In the meantime, at home, we're going to take a little break from our sponsor, but if you don't already know, we have a new series coming out on YouTube. It's called The Real Midwives of Los Angeles. And you can find it at youtube.com/therealmidwives or therealmidwives.com. Welcome back to the Informed Pregnancy Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Elliot Berlin, and I am here with co-host Kristen Palasi and our guest today, Thais Derich. She's the author of Second Chance, A Mother's Quest for a Natural Birth After a Cesarean. And before the break, you were talking about your first birth experience, which I think is not very uncommon. I know for myself, my generation, my parents pretty much, they grew up doing whatever the doctor tells you. And I think they grew up in a simpler time where doctors really didn't have that much pulling us in different directions. Our main goal was to help you and to sort of, if you were sick, help you feel better, get better. But in today's day and age, there's a lot more factors. I mean, there's insurance factors in terms of liability. And so liability is risk to a provider that may not be risk to a patient. And so I have to sort of defensively make choices that protect me, but they may not be in your best interest. And so that's one of many examples of how practitioners today are pulled in a lot of different directions. And so as patients today, we have to be much more active, much more aware, and take an active role in the decision making.
Absolutely.
What was your cesarean experience like? You started to talk about it. You didn't want it. You felt like you failed yourself and potentially your husband. You're an athlete who pictured natural childbirth, even though you didn't really do that much homework to it. It just felt like what you're going to do because you got pregnant, you have a baby inside you, and you just bring it out. So there's sadness or sense of letdown, but mechanically, what was the cesarean experience like for you?
It was horrible. I mean, from the very beginning, just going down, there was one OR, and it was open, so they really wanted to get there before someone else took it, because then we would have had to wait, which would have been really good for me, because I probably would have had my baby in the waiting time. But so they're running me down the hall, and it was so unnecessary to be so rushed like that.
More dramatic.
Unnecessarily dramatic. And then my husband was running with me, and then we get to the doors, and they tell him he can't go in. And I was like, what? For
the birth?
For the prepping period.
Oh, for the prep, okay.
But that moment...
Not that that's okay, but
right.
I thought you were saying he couldn't even be present at the birth.
Yeah, no, the prep period. But it didn't matter at that point. That separation traumatized me. So I did hypnosis after the birth to figure out why I couldn't tell my birth story without bawling. Because finally, after a year, I'm like, okay, it's been a year. I should be able to be over this by now. That's kind of the second birth where it prompted me to figure out what was going on with me psychologically. And what I found out was it was that moment, one of the moments was that moment of separation, which links back to my abandonment by my mother. So him being separated from me at that moment triggered some trauma, dealt with subconscious trauma of separation, and also just going into the OR. I've never been sick, so I didn't know what to expect. It was scary. The doors looked like huge freezer doors, and they were automatic. It was, and then when they seal, they're like, it's scary. Yeah. And
and they took away your support.
Took away my support. Person. So I was in there. I even asked the gurney man, "Can you please stay with me?"
This part of the book that she writes about, I cried because I couldn't imagine like feeling lonely like that and alone. I know we're not talking about that yet, but it was just so sad.
So sad.
Yeah. And he said no.
I can't.
He couldn't stay, the gurney man.
So you had another
abandonment, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk for a minute about your growing up, because it's obviously played a very pivotal role here?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that came up with birth for me was my mom left her 3 children when I was small, around 4. And
what number are you?
Right now?
No.
I'm like, I'm not telling you my age.
No. I would never.
In order of siblings?
2. So in the
You're
middle.
the middle child.
Yes.
Oh, that's even better. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm the stuffing between the 2 pieces of bread, which is what my grandmother used to tell me. And my dad is amazing. My stepmother is amazing. So I never really thought that I was hurt by that time in my life until birth. And for whatever reason, it bubbled up to the top, and I had to deal with it. So, it just kind of, I couldn't do anything but seek some help around my feelings around my mom leaving me when I was young.
And then once you're prepped, what does prep mean? Like, at what point can your husband come back in? And what is the purpose of him not being there? Do you know? Did they tell? No, it's just protocol.
Yeah.
I've heard that also, that like they had them leave or only one person can stay. I think that's becoming more of a practice. They'll allow one person, like your support person, to stay. But
for prep?
Yeah, it wasn't common to let them.
I know even when they give an epidural, they like to kick everybody out.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I had to do that too.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the type of thing that just does so much psychological damage to women. The cesarean started. It was horrible. I was freaking out. I had the anesthesiologist behind me who was my saving grace. I would be like, I can't breathe. I thought I could feel them cutting me. I heard a saw sound.
Oh.
I thought they were using like instead of just a flat scalpel, I thought it was like a moving one, like a chainsaw. So I had these images going on in my brain that weren't helping me. And so he would give me a shot of something and I'd sink, and then come back up and I'd say, what happened? Is the baby here? And I'm just looking at my husband's eyes, and I can just tell how upsetting it is by just looking at it's hard for him too, and so and so the baby comes out, and, the book has this whole thing in great detail. So, but the baby comes out, and he's big and healthy, and they dangle him over me. And they never let me hold him. And then he's off being washed and weighed and, all the shots. No one's asking me any of the, if I want any of this. Nothing's wrong with him, right? So, but I never get to hold him. And then they take him off to the nursery. Still haven't held him. And they wheel me into a closet they call it the recovery room, maybe, or recovery closet. I don't really know. I recently interviewed an OB in Marin, and I was telling her my birth story, and she's like, "Oh, I know that closet." I'm like, "They're still using the closet?"
Oh, wow.
And she's like, "They're still using the closet." I'm like, "We need to get rid of the closet, because this was another thing that came up in hypnosis was being alone in a closet while I
While someone was doing inventory.
right. So I woke
that.
up to, there was a nurse in there, but she was stacking boxes, like opening cardboard boxes and putting stuff in
It's
shelves.
really a closet?
It's really a
I was
closet.
just like saying like it was so small. It was a closet.
No, there
No,
was
where they
stuff
like
in
keep
there.
stuff.
Holy cow.
Yeah. And so I came to and I was like, where's my baby? You know, it's just like, where's my baby? Where's my baby? And she's like, oh, do you want to hold your baby? And I'm like, yes, I want to hold my baby. So I finally get the baby. And yeah.
Did you feel bonded, connected,
Yeah, I felt
excited?
good. I unwrapped. So one thing my sister said, and I remembered her saying this, was she's like, yeah, they delivered my baby all swaddled up and tight, and I unwrapped the baby and, held the baby naked. So that was one thing I learned from her, was I received the baby all tightly swaddled.
Bundled.
And I unwrapped my baby
Shame on you.
and looked at it and, breastfed right away. So
Well, that's amazing.
yeah. So, that was
What was
pretty
the
nice.
physical recovery like?
Horrible. I mean, I could, it was painful to walk. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I never wanted to leave the hospital. Breastfeeding was really painful. And then the part that was really difficult and surprising to me was how I think I felt pain for 2 years afterwards.
At the incision area, or
Yeah, like all, around that area. When I got my period, the pain was new, the pain I'd get. And I called it my phantom pain because I couldn't believe I was still in pain, because everybody told me cesareans were easy and everybody was having cesareans, and that it's...
But for some women, they seem to be.
Yeah, maybe for some people it's easy. I don't know. But for me, it was...
I also wonder if it's something you want, if it might be easier.
Yeah, so
or
that's...
something that you prepare for more. Like
Exactly. That's why I called it my phantom pain. Was I wasn't sure if it was pain from the trauma or real
or both.
physical pain, or a little both. What I determined was, I think it was just my period had changed. So, because the pain would shift from side to side, so I could tell it was with the ovaries on different sides, and I don't really know. So, but
Well,
that went
this
on for a
totally
while.
shifted your whole life.
Yes.
You mentioned that after this, you struggled a little, and then you also struggled with childcare, and you stopped working.
Mm-hmm.
Not to fast forward too far, but how far apart are your kids? They're
3 years.
3 years
Yeah.
apart. Did it take you a while to feel ready to try again?
Yeah, well, again, I had that drive. I wanted to have another kid, and I knew I didn't want just one child. So, but then I was like, I know I don't want to do that again. And my life started opening up. I think the universe kind of noticed it was giving me a second chance. So I met a friend who was a birth advocate, and she had a blog, and she would kind of, she believed me. So a lot of, one thing is when you tell people you're traumatized by their birth, people don't want to hear that, because if we admit that we're traumatizing women in the hospital, like if we all agree to that, that crumbles everything. Mm-hmm. The system is gone because we're admitting that we're doing something wrong. And so nobody wants to look at that. And I felt that, and it was hard to recover because nobody believed me or nobody took me seriously. And so I found
that the experience was traumatic, that it left you traumatized?
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I should add is I went in afterwards and asked what I could have done to avoid the cesarean, and I was told I could have just pushed longer. So
at the hospital,
yeah.
Your team told you that,
Mm-hmm.
but you didn't know that was a choice in the moment.
No.
How was your second pregnancy?
So the second pregnancy was good, and I was doing all this healing, and I found a women's circle, and I was going to chiropractic, and I was doing meditation, acupuncture. I was I saw Business of Being Born, and I was like reading everything. I was reading.
Totally different from your first.
Totally different.
Sounds like 180.
I was like, oh, I guess I need to put some effort in here.
Yeah. Was your hospital supportive of feedback, or, quote unquote, allow feedback, or?
Well, when I knew I wasn't going to go back to the same practice.
Oh,
so...
Did you find another magazine?
Nope. I moved on from that. I knew this was a big deal. And when, I was doing all the reading and I realized that what was happening wasn't evidence-based, and I was reading the studies myself and wondering why my doctors weren't reading the same studies. So it was confusing, and I felt betrayed, and I felt confused at how this could be happening. And this is kind of why I wrote a book about it. It's very strange. It's upsetting that it's still happening in most cases.
With all that info, how do
all
you...
that info, I just started interviewing, and I had questions I wanted to ask, and I knew right away because, one, just getting an interview with an OB, that's pretty hard. So already there was a hospital that didn't even do interviews. So I could cross out a whole hospital just by not being able to meet who was going to be my team. And then there was people that I could tell right away said, yes, you can try for a VBAC, but you have to have this and you have to have that, And I was like, well, and then I'd push back, and they would relent, but then they would say more restrictions, or different restrictions, and I just wasn't feeling, I'm like, this doesn't really feel, it feels like a battle. It doesn't feel like, yay, Thais, so happy you want to be back. Let's work on this. We're all going to do it together. You can do it. We'll be there to keep you safe. It was like, oh, you want to do that? Okay, we're going to make it as hard as possible, and you're probably going to end up in a C-section anyway. So we'll let you try, but we're going to have the OR ready,
Yeah, even that name, trial of labor.
Yeah.
You give it a shot.
Yeah, it makes it impossible. And so I realized that I couldn't even give birth in a hospital, because if I really wanted to do this, I wasn't going to get the support I needed in the hospital.
Did you have another choice?
So I had to look into home birth, and I didn't even know home birth existed before. And so proposing that to my husband and to my family was kind of just very, crazy. Like,
crazy to you or crazy to them?
Crazy to them, and crazy to me too. Like, I had to keep, through the whole pregnancy, I had to keep reminding myself why I was doing this, because nobody else supported me. My husband's got on board and supported me, and was, amazing in that, because, he was I was having this huge it wasn't just the birth. I was having this huge personal growth period, and he was just like, whoa, my wife, she's changed.
Yeah.
And
scary.
How was that for you guys, and also having a small
Yeah.
child?
We were good. We made it through, and it was a good period for me.
And the midwives in your area, they do VBAC or HBAC, I guess?
Yeah, so there was one that said, sorry, I don't do that, which is fine. Everybody has their comfort level. But it did shock me, because I was making this huge leap to even consider a home birth. And my first phone call was, and I'm also arguing with everybody about, no, it's safe, actually. And then a midwife tells me she doesn't think it's safe. She doesn't think it's safe. And I'm like, oh, God. So I had to go, I kept going back to the research. And so I found Maria Iarella, who's amazing and has, delivered well over 1,000 births. And
you're doing this research all while you're already pregnant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
At what point did you start with her in your pregnancy?
Pretty early on, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have a totally different, your visits are more midwific and... Your
Yeah.
preparation's more midwific.
Yeah.
I mean, you write about this in the book, but I want to also talk about the development of the book, so I don't mean to fast forward too far.
Yeah.
But how does your second birth go?
So the second birth is beautiful.
How does it start?
It starts, so I call my second baby my 9 to 5 baby, because it starts with contractions early morning. I meditate for like 3 hours. We call the doula. She comes.
It starts with contractions, not your water breaking?
Right.
So you're already off on a different path.
Yeah. Because I think, what do you take when you want to make your...
Castor oil?
No, when you want to make your water bag strong.
Oh, stronger?
Is
you
it
took
grapefruit?
supplements?
Yes, I was doing the grapefruit stuff.
Sorry, that's
and
really
it
loud.
might have worked because my water didn't break.
Yeah.
So, so it was great. I had doula, and I was going through, and it was good, and it got hard. And the main thing with Maria was I said, the biggest thing is uterine rupture. So I don't, I'm not here. I don't want to die at home, but so I want you to make sure that at any sign that you see this going out of the normal spectrum, that I go to the hospital.
Yeah, just to fill in that information,
Yeah.
uterine rupture is the risk of doing a vaginal birth after a cesarean, right? It's the concern that scar, that incision that was made into your uterus, maybe during the heat of labor, will become so weak that it separates and the baby's not fully contained anymore inside your uterus. So I think uterine rupture is probably not only a terrible term, but not all that accurate for what normally happens. But it's, you don't want to do dangerous things. You just want a different experience and a more supportive experience in a more nurturing environment. But your midwife, you made it clear, if you see signs that there's a pink flag, I'd rather not wait at home and see if that becomes a red flag.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really trusted her, and I had a lot of great support team, and I got to a point where I was stuck, kind of the same spot where I was stuck with the first baby. And I remember asking her, am I going to be able to do this?
Stuck meaning you're pushing now for a while and the baby's not coming down? Or?
They want you to go 1 centimeter an hour.
Oh, you're stuck on the curve.
Yeah. So I stopped progressing. And I remember asking that, and she said, well, Thais, you have to be complete to push this baby out. And I just loved how she was not trying to be nice to me, She was just like, well, this is the fact here.
Yeah.
Like,
no sugarcoating.
You need
to get there.
And so, and that for me, like, I think as an athlete, I was like, fine, I am going to get there. And from then on, I just became complete. She did massage a little bit of the cervix away. And then the baby came pretty fast afterwards.
You were on land, or were you in water?
I was on land, yeah.
Did you want to be on land, or you weren't sure?
I was asked if I wanted to go back in the water, and I wasn't. I think the thought of walking back to the first
to the
tub,
tub? Yeah, it was too much.
Yeah. So it was great, and
certainly different.
So different. And
where did you choose in your home too?
I was on my bed.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because we have all white sheets, and when she did
Head.
When she did her walkthrough, Maria's like, do you have any other color?
Yeah. Our midwife for our home birth said to go to the 99-cent store and see if you can find some linen. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
She didn't tell me, though, to put a towel next to the tub because my wife did give birth in water. And that would have been very helpful because that step out of the tub with all the gooey, stuff. And my kids were all sleeping, but then it was getting later. They were going to wake up, and I went into the bathroom. I was like, crime. It looked like a crime scene. So my midwife was like, you got to get hydrogen peroxide and a toothbrush. And so that's, my brand new baby, and my wife's cuddling him, and I'm on the floor with the grout.
Away.
Yeah, scrubbing away. I did a good job. But that one piece of information
would have been helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of amazing that you had this journey, and that you clearly feel passionately that you know other people are having the same, falling into the same pitfalls and being pushed into the same outcomes. And so you wrote the book, Second Chance, and it's a good book. And I think it's going to help your mission to alert others and to try to help change the system. You've been doing some book touring. What is the response that you get to it?
I am really encouraged. I'll tell you just the story that comes up in my mind whenever I'm asked this question. There was a 70-year-old woman in the audience. So you take questions at the end, and whenever people read my book and whenever I talk to them, the first reaction is they want to tell me their birth story. And so I wasn't surprised when she started telling her birth story, but what she said was, she's like, I didn't realize, she just was like, I'm so happy you're saying this out loud, because I still feel upset about my birth. And she's 70.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, once we put, break the wall of, oh, it's fine, I have a healthy baby, like everything's fine, and we start really telling the truth, you start to hear the truth back. And there's so many people who have had hard experiences that I just feel like we really need to fix this, because I think that we keep making the pain over and over again when we know the answers. The evidence is there, the studies are there. If the studies aren't there, we need to invest in women and take this seriously and do the studies to get everybody on the same page so we stop hurting women. We shouldn't walk out of the hospital traumatized. We should walk out feeling empowered and
Wonder Woman,
beautiful and strong, and
that's what you see sometimes.
Yeah.
I imagine how you felt after your second one.
Yeah, and I think that's what prompted the book again, was I was just like, wow, I could have this horrible cesarean experience, or I could have this amazing, transformative, empowering moment that changed my life, where you feel literally, when you're pushing a baby out, you're as close to God as you can get, You're not in control. Something else is happening to you.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Exactly.
I would just also say that I think you can have equally traumatic experiences that aren't cesarean.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of your first experience wasn't necessarily the cesarean, but everything that led up to it as well. And I also think that it's important to note that I think cesareans are a great thing for people who need them, certainly, and for people who want them. Mm-hmm. I think that it would be equally awful for someone who needed to have a cesarean not have access to it.
Absolutely.
So it's the system and how we're approaching birth in general that needs some fixing up and some tuning.
Yeah.
And I think that strong and courageous women like you who come back from that experience and share openly, and then take a megaphone, whether it's a book or a book tour or this decade keynote speaking, podcasting, and shouting off the rooftops until people listen to you, is going to change the system. I think you're going to make big changes.
Thank you. I sure hope so.
I think you do it really well also, because it's like when you read the book, it's not even, I don't feel like, oh, it's because of this. It's just the fact that and I feel like what this podcast is all about, being informed. It's that you didn't feel like you had these people who you felt were supposed to have your best interest, whether or not you have a birth plan or you don't, but you just didn't feel like they had your back, and you felt like they were just making decisions based on things that were motivating them rather than making sure you were having a good experience or that you were understanding just even what was happening to you at the time.
I think the main thing, there was no connection.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, part of it was my fault too, because I didn't do anything, you know, but that's how a lot of people are when they go into childbirth. So what that needs to happen is there needs to be, like a coach.
So you're a strong woman. You didn't do anything because the system set you up to be disempowered.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't really think it's your fault.
Yeah, or any woman's fault, really, because, I mean, it's your first time. It's not like, I think that's what's so scary sometimes about birth is when it's your first time, you don't know. Like, you don't know what a contraction is going to feel like. You don't know what's going to happen to your body, how you're going to react, how you're going to feel.
Yeah.
So if you don't know any of that, how would you know how to prepare for it? The second time you can get the information, you seek out whatever happened to you that you wished you could have done differently, like hindsight 2020, right?
Yeah, that's so well put. Yeah, and that's the hard thing with the first cesarean, you know, because then it makes it even harder the next time to have a natural birth if that's what you want. You know, 44% of hospitals are banning vaginal birth after cesarean, and so your women are actually being forced into C-section, and so now we get into this whole human rights issue, women's rights issue, where we're forcing women into interventions that they don't want because there's just no one to provide them with what they want.
Where can we find you online and get more information and just follow your journey as it continues?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on social media, so Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and then I have a website, which is my first and last name.
Thais Derich.
Yes.
How do we spell that?
ThaisDerich.com.
Okay, we'll check it out. I really want to thank you again for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Kristen for joining me and for all your work in breaking this book apart and analyzing it and getting all the juicy details out of it. For our listeners, thank you for listening. And you can find more information at informedpregnancy.com. And if you have any questions, always feel free to write to us, info@informedpregnancy.com.
Doctor, give me the news. I got a whole lot of questions for you.